Hello and welcome to the Michael Mamas Show. I'm your host, Michael Mamas, and we're coming to you from Mount Soma, home of the Sri Someshwara Temple in the mountains of Western North Carolina. And today is a very practical consideration podcast, and it's unbelievably important. In fact, I would even say, you see some people that seem to go through life and they just coast. Everything just seems to work. And other people, everywhere they turn, it's just rough and difficult. And if you really take a step back and look at it, a lot of that just has to do with the art of communication. But that communication is also the number one life challenge. I remember when I was in the ashram, Maharishi had a bunch of us go get MBAs, and the main focus was how to run a not-for-profit. And at the time, I was like, oh man, I was in the ashram. I thought I'd be a brahmachari the rest of my life, And the idea of getting a degree in business, please, something else, underwater basket weaving, anything but business. And it turns out it's quite applicable. But in the MBA, I remember there were some good things they taught. One of them was communication is the number one challenge in business. That really stuck with me because it's also the number one challenge in life. They also said that when it comes to contracts and things and making agreements, it's even more important to be diligent about what's actually in the contract when you're dealing with friends and family, even more so than, just business relationships. I thought those were a couple of good points. There are a lot of good little things like that, little tidbits from the MBA. Much of the MBA, I guess that's true of any field of study, but much of the MBA is just common sense, really, when it comes to number crunching and things like that. Doesn't mean it's fun, doesn't mean it's what I like to do, but it's common sense, and it's important if you're going to do business, So at any rate, let's dig into this and take a look at why communication is so challenging. What's that about? Number one thing is we have to take a look at the connection between thoughts and emotions. If you say something not right, or if somebody else says something to you that's just not phrased the way that you're comfortable with or they're comfortable with, it can trigger emotions, an emotional response. Basically, they get angry or they get upset or they get hurt. And once that happens, once emotions are triggered, emotions dominate, emotions rule. And though we're like to think of ourselves as rational beings, you can rationalize anything with the mind, with the intellect, with thoughts. And that's what we do. If we have an emotion that's been triggered, then we look at the relationship from a perspective that justifies those emotions. Oh, that person's bad, or oh, they did wrong, or oh, I can't trust them, or whatever. So what is the main ingredient, I think, that helps a person just go through life seamlessly? And that's how well they communicate. So another barrier to communication is you think they're on the same page that you are. You think when you talk about something that they know what you're talking about. They understand where you're coming from. That's already been established, for example. But they don't, and it hasn't. But when you're feeling like, okay, they know where you're coming from, they know who you are, they know where you're at, then you get comfortable speaking more freely. And the closer the relationship gets, the more comfortable with the people you become, the more relaxed you become in your speech, in your communication. And as a result of that, you trigger things. And things get triggered so easily, but we're more predisposed to acting on them than we could say retaliating in response to something that hits us the wrong way. When the relationships get closer, if you're going through the checkout line at the grocery store and the checkout person says something that hits you wrong, it's no big deal, and you would just do the politically correct thing just to get through the checkout line and go home. But when it comes to the more intimate, the closer a relationship becomes, the freer we get in not letting it pass and dwelling on it and retaliating based upon it. And it just really messes up relationships. So the main thing, we have our emotions. We have our emotional responses, and emotions dominate. But now, how do we integrate with wisdom our emotions, how we feel about something? That defines the thing from our perspective. So how do we integrate those emotions with our thoughts? It's not so easy to take a step back and look at a situation and say, well, I just had this emotional response, and I get it now that I think about it and things got clarified. Maybe we talked it out and okay, I get where they're coming from now. And I misunderstood, for example, or I spoke improperly. I didn't intend to. I was just too relaxed with my words. But to get the emotions to be with that is another thing. You can understand something, the same with spirituality in general. You can understand a deep spiritual concept, and you can create a model of what you think that means and how you're supposed to behave and act that way and think you're more spiritually advanced. But really, it's when it gets integrated in the depth of your being and in your physiology, in your emotions. And so when your emotional response to something that isn't said quite right is more cultured, then you can work through those things more easily. But how do you do that? Where does that come from? It really comes from being established in the self, being established in your own being. In the long term, that's a long process, meditation, all like that. In the short run, they give different ways of doing it. Taking a deep breath, going for a walk. If something hits you wrong, and this is, I think, probably the most practical way of dealing with it, is let it go for the time being. When you feel that, and you can feel it in your body, monitoring how things feel in your body, not emotionally how they feel. But if you have an emotional response, where is that in your body? Where do you feel that in your body? And then just being with that and realizing, hey, this is a physiological response I'm having here. That in the short run can help us settle down, give it time, take a shower, have a bowl of ice cream, whatever, so that you can come from a deeper place of wisdom. And so much of conflicts, if we can just do that, the conflict goes away. So I get it. Okay, maybe I misunderstood and blah, blah, blah. And it melts away. But when we can't do that, I mean, that's the stuff that wars are made out of. War doesn't make any sense. We all know that. You go kill a bunch of people. Where does that get you, I saw it. I was just watching the news. I have it on when I do my computer and I hear things. And they had the Pope on there. And he said one thing I thought was quite good. And he said that, let's see if I can even remember now. He said that war and winning a war does not bring about peace. And that's just because why? Emotions are what rules. Okay, you won a war, they lost. That doesn't mean their emotions shifted. If anything, it's just worse. And it will crop up again at some point. So how to integrate our emotions with the depth of our soul, the depth of our being, and have our thoughts and words come out then in a more cultured way, that changes everything. And it's the number one life challenge. I really think so. When it comes to functioning in the world, that's the number one challenge. Communication is so difficult. But when it works, then that's one of the main keys of floating through life seamlessly, effortlessly, easily. Everything you touch turns to gold, that kind of a thing. But it's not so easy to do. In fact, don't expect that of yourself or anybody. We all make mistakes. We all have emotional responses. The key is then, when you have those inevitable emotional responses, what do you do about it? How do you work with it? Or do you just hold on to it? No, this is my truth. So much of what people call their truth isn't their truth, it's their stuff. You know, Anandamayi Ma said, she's a beautiful saint, and she said that in an ashram, the people in the ashram, the monastery, chip away at one another's samskaras. Maharishi Patanjali talked about samskaras. Samskaras are impressions on the mind, conditionings, programmings of the mind. How you respond to things, for example, is one example of samskaras. And in the ashram, just by people interacting, they're triggering each other all the time. And over time, they're chipping away at each other's samskaras. And eventually, people learn how to get along. Ashram's a lot of fun. It was great. Some of the best years of my life, for sure. Emails. Any delicate subject should not be addressed in emails, because that's just a license, a key to conflict. What you write and how you expect them to hear it and interpret it is so often completely different than what you intended, and it creates conflict. So many times, if stuff like that comes up in an email, it's best not to address it in an email if possible. Better one-on-one, face-to-face sort of a thing. And manage it wisely, Maharishi once said that, I forget, a very, very significant percentage of your evolution comes from your speech. That ties into this podcast beautifully, doesn't it? And one last thing, when it comes to feeling it in your body, when you have an emotion, feel it in your body. I talk about chakras, energy centers. I call them psychophysiological centers, because they're physiological and they're also very much psychological. They're both. They're psychophysiological centers. I'd use the typical example, when you fall in love, you don't say my elbow is swelling in love. No, you say my heart is swelling in love. It's a psychophysiological center that deals with I-thou relationships. And so when you get triggered in a positive or a negative way, you can feel those things in your body, in your chakras actually, but in your body. And so putting your attention on those areas and just resting with it. You don't try to melt it. You don't try to bring light into it. I mean, you can if you want, but really it's just being there. Feel the body. Close your eyes and feel the body. That goes a long way into being a modality to start to heal this whole thing when it comes to lack of communication and the negativity it breeds, Okay, Scotty, anything else on this?
No, I think that's it.
Yeah, I think it was pretty good.
Yeah.
It's really important. It's so important. Please think about it, and we'll talk with you again next week. Thanks for listening.